Joining us now is again retired Army Colonel Allen West, also with us in the studio, Princeton University lecturer and author Dr. Lauren Wright. Great to see you, Dr. Wright. We'll be back with Allen West in just a second, but first, Dr. Wright. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the leadership, they have come out against impeachment. They think it needs to be a bipartisan thing, but you listen to other members of her party, this term, inherent contempt, charging guys like Barr $25,000 a day. It seems like there's still this drumbeat for impeachment.
There is, but Nancy Pelosi does not want to do this, and I don't think we'll see her do it. And every single time Jerry Nadler renders a threat, Adam Schiff renders a threat, this $25,000 a day thing is just another example of this, and the administration defies it, that emboldens them. That makes them look like they're in charge. That makes them look more powerful, and by the way, they are. So Congress really has to decide, are they going to go this civil enforcement route? Are they going to continue with the criminal contempt charge? Or are they going to have a congressional sergeant of arms arrest someone and force them to appear? I just think if you go down the path, there's not a realistic option for them at this point. The public has to decide what to do with this president in 2020.
Let's ask Colonel West. Colonel West, do you think Nancy Pelosi will be able to rein in her caucus and tamp down some of this impeachment talk? Because it does seem, when you listen to guys like Nadler, there's almost like they can't help themselves.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And this recent thing about inherent, whatever you want to call it, it reminds me of the scene from the movie A Few Good Men, where Demi Moore stood up and said, "I strenuously object." And the judge still said overruled. When you look at Gerald Nadler, it wasn't too long ago when Gerald Nadler was against the opening and the public disclosure of documents related to Bill Clinton and the investigation of Ken Starr. And it's amazing to me how that has changed. The problem for Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, the leadership there in the House Democrat caucus, is that their base is demanding punishment for Donald Trump, President Trump, for one thing, because he won that election. And they're not going to sit back and wait for the November 2020 election. This is why you have them there in the House Democratic majority. But the incredible thing, John, is that the folks that enabled them to have that majority were the folks that won in those, somewhat red congressional districts, the moderate Democrats, who you have not heard too much from since they came into power.
Yeah, that's true. They're a very quiet bunch. Let's take a listen to something that House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy said on CBS Face the Nation yesterday. And this has been a point of contention for Republicans, especially since Nadler and a lot of Democrats say, you got to make the whole report available to the public. Here's McCarthy on what Nadler's pursuit of the truth is.
If Chairman Nadler was that serious about getting to the bottom, he hasn't even taken the time to go read, which he's approved to read, the 99.9% of any obstruction inside the Mueller report. But he hasn't even gone to read it while trying to hold the Attorney General in contempt. He's asking him to break the law.
Now, Lauren, this was shocking to me. Last week, when I last checked in this Wednesday, these 6 Democrats, including Nadler, who have access to the mostly unredacted Mueller report, everything except the grand jury testimony, still have not read that lightly redacted or almost zero redactions inside of it. So it almost proves, I guess they're trying to protest that unless they get the full report, it's no good. But don't you think they'd have a lot more credibility if they went back and said, look, we read this lightly redacted report, we still don't have the information we need?
I don't quite understand this strategy. If you have the information and you're for transparency, consume the information that you have. But again, and John, I always go back to the messaging of this, but the average American does not know a lot about subpoenas. Right. They're not interested in legal and theoretical presidential power. They're not interested in those arguments. They're not really knowledgeable about what contempt is. They want to know, what are you going to do for me and my everyday life? And the further Republicans get away from that, the worse for them, and the further Democrats get away from them, the worse for them. Everybody needs to, I think, rein in this language about vast conspiracies and our government falling apart,
but so
and
hard
focus
to do
on solutions. It shouldn't be.
When we're in the midst of an election. All right, one more thing for President Trump, too, or for Allen West, real quick, talking about this whole constitutional crisis. I want to take a look at something that President Trump tweeted at Colonel West. Democrats have gone nuts, he says, since the Mueller report was released. He also tweeted this, quote, "The constitutional crisis," in parentheses or in quotation marks, "is the Democrats refusing to work. Let them start by fixing the mess that their immigration laws have caused at the southern border." Colonel West, don't you really think that this would be the best way for Democrats to really win some new voters, is to take a cold, hard look at this immigration issue and the crisis of the border and do something, make it look like they care, and try and fix that crisis?
No, you're absolutely right. And it was about 3 weeks ago, I went down to the border in McAllen, Texas, and the people down there are just beside themselves. And that's a very Democrat-controlled area. But those people who are Hispanic, but they are legal citizens, they want something done because their safety and security is being threatened. And just the same as you were just talking about how Gerald Nadler has not read the document, these Democrats have not been down to the border, and they have not really spent the time to see what is happening. I mean, we're talking about 1,000, 1,200 people that are being apprehended each and every day. So when you talk about those basic issues that affect American people, this thing called illegal immigration and the criminal illegal immigration problem that we have in sanctuary cities and sanctuary states, that's something that needs to be resolved.
Still here with us, our panel, Congressman Allen West, former Congressman Allen West, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, and also with us here in the studio, Dr. Lauren Wright, a Princeton University lecturer. All right, Dr. Wright, we talked about this before the program. We read over the entire quote in the context, including the part which we didn't hear, where she does talk about the horror and the tragedy of the Holocaust. But how do you use the term calming in any sort of context in relation to the Holocaust? Because even with her defense and the defense that I read in the Washington Post today and the defense from Steny Hoyer, I'm still having a hard time grasping this comment.
You don't unless an apology comes right after it. And we've had a lot of these conversations on the show about what happens when someone says something hurtful and offensive and how to handle it. And what I thought was really interesting here was Ilhan Omar's defense of her, because she said, well, the president defended white supremacists and he called, the Friday night Nazis very fine people. That's not the point. We need to stop looking at abhorrent behavior and then saying, well, the other side did it too. Two wrongs do not make a right. And we need to look within our party, in addition to across the aisle at our political opponents, and look at the language that we're using and take everything on a case-by-case basis. And as I said to you during the break, I think it's part of being a responsible public figure and legislator to not say things like this.
Colonel West, it's not just that this is the first time that Rashida Tlaib has said something like this. There's a history of this. We can all go back and think about, on election night, let's impeach the mofo, is what she said in some more colorful language. They tend to court this type of controversy. It seems as though they like to throw these statements out there and then complain about the criticism they get on the back end.
Well, it's very Pavlovian. If you continue to reward bad behavior, you will get more bad behavior. There's no consequences. There's no ramifications for the things that Representative Tlaib or Representative Omar are saying. And you cannot think of a worse time for her to bring up a comment such as that, when right now we have rockets and missiles that are raining in on Israel from, Hamas, which is a designated terrorist organization. So in other words, she is kind of supporting and giving fuel to the fire of Hamas, who has called for, and the Muslim Brotherhood and others, the complete destruction of the modern-day state of Israel. So untimely, insensitive, I can think of many different adjectives, but the important thing is that you're giving people political sound bites. You're creating the commercial advertisements that will be used against the Democrat Party starting next September of 2020.
Right, and the consequences of this stuff. And when somebody speaks out of turn like this, and the thing that I am trying to figure out is if she does this on purpose, you could make that argument, or if it's just out of ignorance, not really understanding, the nuances of the U.S. relationship with Israel and Palestine and the difficulties that have happened in the past. I mean, earlier today we talked to Bill O'Reilly about Tlaib's comments, and he had this take on it. O'Reilly says he doesn't think the congressman meant any harm with her words, but she does mean harm to the Jewish people because she believes they took her ancestors' land. Here is O'Reilly.
She's so inarticulate and so ignorant of history that when she says something like that, nobody knows what she's talking about. So you've got a woman in Congress, you've got a number of them now, who really don't know anything And for various reasons, they're there. They have power. They're representing a district. But they don't know anything. But that doesn't stop them from talking.
And Colonel West, it's as if nobody remembers what happened in the Yom Kippur War or, the other history involving Israel going back to 1948. It's as if there's only one history that Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar want their constituents to know about.
No, you're absolutely right. And for a little bit of a history lesson, the word Palestine was originated after the Emperor Hadrian, the Roman Emperor Hadrian, decided to punish the Jewish people after the Simon Bar Kokhba revolt. And what he did was say that the region would no longer be called Judea, it would be called Syria Palestina. And of course, that root word of Palestina goes back to the ancient Philistines, who were Greek and not Arab or not Middle Eastern. So I think that what you have to come to understand is that associating that term, which is for a region, not so much for a people, that's how you get in trouble. And I just got to tell you, I think that Representative Tlaib knows exactly what she's saying, just the same as Representative Omar or Representative Ocasio-Cortez, but they just continue to push that envelope because they have a party that has gone very much so to the left, and it's a very anti-Semitic party, and all you have to do is go on college campuses and look at the BDS movement.
Yeah, well, the whole party is not anti-Semitic, but there are definitely some anti-Semitic things. And Valerie Plame, that's another clip everybody should look like. She's the one catching some heat for an anti-Semitic retweet that she had. She's apologizing, but Rashida Tlaib is not. All right, let's turn our attention now to 2020. A few of the Democratic hopefuls, they are focusing on the gun debate as their main campaign issue. First, New Jersey Senator Cory Booker released a plan to combat gun violence. His plan includes familiar proposals like universal background checks and banning semi-automatic rifles and high-capacity magazines, but it also includes some bolder ideas like a federal permit to purchase law that would require every gun owner to submit fingerprints and complete a rudimentary gun safety course in order to get a license. Booker also wants new semi-automatic handguns to be micro-stamped. Booker's plan also includes language to expand the list of people who cannot purchase a firearm. And he also wants to repeal the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. All right. Also, fellow Democratic Senator Kamala Harris says that she will issue an executive order on gun control in her first 100 days in office should she be elected. She would be, the order would be for anyone who sells more than 5 guns a year to perform background checks on their customers. Harris also plans to direct the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to take away the licenses of gun dealers who don't follow the law. And then, of course, Congressman West, you look at these gun proposals. Eric Swalwell, the congressman from California, he's basically running on a, anti-gun platform here. Why do you think these Democratic candidates feel like the gun control issue is such a salient one for them to rise up? Because a lot of these candidates seem to be having some difficult time climbing in the polls. Why do you think guns is the issue, or they think the issue to do that with?
Well, in full disclosure, I'm on my second term as a board of director for the National Rifle Association, and I am a legal law-abiding gun owner. And all I would do, John, is refer you to one of the first things that Hugo Chavez did down in Venezuela back 2011, 2012. He outlawed private gun ownership, and he used gun violence as an excuse to do that. And look at what has happened to the people in Venezuela who can no longer defend themselves against the tyranny of the military of not Hugo Chavez, but Nicolas Maduro. I think right now that people believe that this is a popular issue. It's an emotional issue. And when you look at what just recently happened out in Colorado at the STEM school, these were 2 young people that broke into a gun safe and stole the weapons that they used. So instead of focusing on the individuals, just the same as Nicholas Cruz down in South Florida, there were many warnings and indicators where law enforcement did nothing about. They seek to use this to leverage, I'll be very honest, this is about gun confiscation. This is about disarming the American populace. And if you go back in our history, that was the reason why the British were marching inland on April the 19th of 1775 to destroy a gun and armaments factory in Concord, Massachusetts. We didn't have a government, didn't have an army. We just had armed citizens that understood they didn't want to be subjects. And I think that's an important history lesson.
All right. So here with us, our panel, retired Congressman and Lieutenant Colonel Allen West. Also with us, Princeton University lecturer, Dr. Lauren Wright. All right, so we're taking a look, guys, at this recruiting effort by the GOP. Dr. Wright, a good idea for the GOP to recruit more women, minorities? for these congressional districts?
They have needed to do this for such a long time. Demographics are not in their favor. Women vote at higher rates than men on average. They count for the largest proportion and number of eligible voters in this country. It's extremely important for the GOP to do this. I hate to say it, but after 2012, when the party did the big autopsy and they said this was going to be their #1 priority to open the tent of the party, they did exactly the opposite in 2016. So I don't know if I believe them. I give them credit for trying, and it's really, really important that we get Republican women.
Colonel West, what do you think about this recruitment effort, trying to get more women and minorities to run for GOP House seats next year?
I think it's absolutely imperative. One of the things you have to understand, you can have a great message, but it's about the messengers, because many people are focused on an image and they want to feel comfortable with a person. You know, one of the things, you know, living out here in the Lone Star State of Texas, you know, July the 4th of 1867, the Republican Party of Texas was founded. The Republican Party of Texas was founded by 150 blacks and 20 whites. But yet no one talks about that. As a matter of fact, two of the very first 3 chairmen of the Republican Party of Texas were black. The longest running was a guy by the name of Norris Wright Cooney. So I think that Republicans need to talk more so about their history and reconnect with minority communities that are really conservative in nature. And I think if you talk more about principles and values, you'll be able to reconnect with a lot of these communities that are starting to peel away from the progressive socialism of the Democrat Party.
All right, still with us, our political panel, Princeton University lecturer, Dr. Lauren Wright, also with us, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, and Congressman Allen West, who's joining us from Texas. All right, Colonel West, how much of age should factor in to our presidential election decisions?
Well, you know, I'm almost close to 60, and as you can see, I have a lot of white on top of my head. But some people say age is just a number, and I think that when you look at President Trump, without a doubt, he is one of the most energetic 70-year-olds that we have ever seen out there. But eventually, that could have some wear and tear on you. When you look at Joe Biden, and we just heard Secretary of Defense Gates talk about intellectual acuity, there have been some very questionable gaffes that Vice President Biden has already made since his announcement. And then Bernie Sanders, I mean, sometimes it looks as if he's a little bit out of control with some of the speeches that he's giving. I think that you have to be able to relate, especially to young people, and they have to believe that you are talking with them and not at them. So I think that's why you see initially there was a big fervor over Robert Francis O'Rourke, Mayor Pete from South Bend, Indiana, and some of the others that are trying to, you know, appeal to those younger voters.
Yeah, let's take a look. President Trump, he kind of took a knock at Mayor Pete, comparing him to Alfred E. Newman. For those of you at home, if you're not familiar, Alfred E. Newman was the guy who was always on the cover of Mad magazine. But here is what Mayor Pete said in response to the president.
I'll be honest, I had to Google that. I guess it's a generational thing. I didn't get the reference. It's kind of funny, I guess, but he's also the president of the United States, and I'm surprised he's not spending more time trying to salvage this China deal.
All right, so Mayor Pete with a joke there. I don't think that's going to endear him to any Mad Magazine fans, unfortunately. But this is kind of the jumping off point, because I wanted to take a look at this piece in The Atlantic by Niall Ferguson called The Coming Generation War. And it makes the case that Democrats are rapidly becoming the party of the young, and the consequences of that could be profound. Take a listen to this quote. If Roosevelt was right and demographics are destiny, then the Democrats are going to inherit a windfall. Just 10 years from now, if the current population trends hold, Gen Z and millennials together will make up a majority of the American voting age population. He goes on to say key liberal policy priorities, universal health care, student loan forgiveness, immigration reform, and even some version of the Green New Deal would stand a decent chance of becoming law, which is scary. And a self-identifying Democratic Socialist Party could win the presidency in just 10 years from now, Colonel West. So what do Republicans need to do to make sure that Democrats don't have a monopoly on being the party of the future?
Well, they have to explain the whole mantra or the culture of the participation trophy, that trying to receive something for doing nothing, eventually it has no worth, it has no meaning whatsoever. And I think for whatever reason, we have a generation that has failed young people in doing that. And so I think when I look at here in Texas at the Battle of the Alamo, William Barrett Travis was 26 years of age when he wrote that incredible letter that making that stand at the Alamo. He led 185 for 13 days. He's just 26. So let's tell the stories about strong millennials, strong young men and women who have really made America what it is today, instead of trying to court them with more free handouts and things of that nature.
All right, I'll give the last word to Dr. Lauren Wright on how does the GOP reach out and make sure Democrats don't become the party of the future?
Well, young voters are another one of these groups, right? They need to recruit minority voters, women voters, and young people. They've been doing very badly among those groups, my research shows, for a very long time. And I happen to think that the Green New Deal and Medicare for All and these far left progressive policies don't have a chance of passing in Congress. That's just not how our system works. But yes, Republicans need to make a case for young people, and the question with age is relatability.
Right.
And the question is, do you understand me and my life? Do you know what my family's going through? Do you care about me? Do you get it? So if an older person can make that case to young people, that works. And if a younger person can make that case to older voters, that works.
So special thanks to Colonel Allen West. Thank you so much for your time, sir. And also special thanks to Dr. Lauren Wright for being with us in the studio. And that's going to do it. You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for breaking news and give us a thumbs up. If you like this video, then share it with your friends. Remember, you can watch Newsmax TV live on YouTube. Newsmax TV, real news for real people.